Gordon Young, co-founder of The Drum, and welcome to this Predictions 2021 discussion on customer experience. And let me give you the first prediction of this session. The next 25 minutes or so will be fascinating as I have some great guests. The structure of almost everything we do now, what people buy, how and where they work, how they interact with others, has been upended by world events in 2020. The consumer behaviour shifts we are seeing today are not a blip. They are likely to stay with us forever. That is the conclusion of a major report by Accenture Interactive. It argues that some of those trends that have been in motion for years have been accelerated, not created by the pandemic. And one of these trends is a greater emphasis on customer experience. And it is one that is galvanising companies to push beyond the CX philosophy and organise their whole business around the delivery of exceptional experiences. A new term has been coined to describe this new focus, business experience. And to discuss what all this will mean in practice to you, I am joined by Pratish Gadia, lead UK and Ireland for Accenture Interactive, and Ali Jones, Chief Customer Officer at the Co-op, who also has background in working for the likes of Marks & Spencer, Next, Debenhams and Arcadia. So Pratish and Ali, thanks once again for agreeing to take part in this little session. But can I perhaps kick off with you first of all, Pratish, because I assume that you're going to say one of your key predictions this year is that people are going to start referring a lot more to business experience. So perhaps we can kick off by can you just explain exactly what you mean by that?
Yeah, Gordon, thank you. And thank you for the question and the opportunity. Look, the business of experience, our research shows, is a new category of leadership in the environment where savvy CIOs, or CEOs, apologies, and their leadership teams will embrace as we move forward in the coming decade. Look, the last few years have seen a real focus on customer experience, but today, good CX has become really mainstream and frankly leading to sort of see a same. The business of experience is a real evolution of customer experience. It describes companies who organize themselves all around the delivery of exceptional experiences. And as we get into this, I'll give you more examples, but it really is about, I guess I'd say, a holistic approach that allows you to become really customer obsessed and really reignite reliable and sustainable growth with a real focus on service.
Yeah, so really it's a sort of experience 360 all the way through the entire business.
Exactly right. And moving away from silos with great experience that are completely disconnected, and mimicking an organization that end to end is obsessed about experience, right? Because our customers are much more fickle than the other one.
Now, Ali, it's obviously been a fascinating and tough year for people and working in the high street. But as somebody who's been in the eye of the storm, what do you think really separates those who have sort of weathered that storm to the others who have perhaps succumbed?
Well, thank you for the question and thank you for inviting me here. It's great to be with you. This is a topic that could go on for hours, but I think for those that have weathered the storm, they've been really, really focused on what matters most. And I think for us at the Co-op, when the pandemic started, the absolute number one priority was our colleagues. And just listening to the answer to the previous question in terms of, how great experience runs across the business, your colleagues who are in all parts of your business and who are frontline to your customers are just so incredibly important. And obviously for us at the Co-op, the biggest issue was their safety. They were local heroes. They are key workers. They are still local heroes. And our colleagues were dealing with general public who were unsure about what was happening with the pandemic and making sure that we fed the nation and also dealt with grieving families, which obviously was an incredibly tough thing for them to do. So that absolute focus, I think, will be replicated in other businesses who've had to use the phrase of 2020, pivot their operations. It's really thinking about what's the colleague experience, what's the colleague got to deliver through this crisis, and how do we support them to be the best that they can possibly be.
And it's actually a really good example, isn't it? Because obviously there you are putting a lot of emphasis on on the colleagues, the people working within the co-op, which really is part of your point as well, isn't it, Pritesh, about business experience is not only customer focused, it's as legitimate to make sure you're bringing your colleagues and your staff along in the journey as well.
And I think that's right, Gordon. And I think if the whole organisation doesn't understand the importance of experience and the purpose, then I think we'll never succeed. And I really like Ali's example of how they really care for staff. The other one, if I may, that really resonated with me, and I wondered about it at the time, was Next. Next was a traditional kind of catalogue retailer that had an amazing supply chain and warehouse. Yet they were very bold, and they said their staff were concerned about COVID, so they shut the warehouse down. They sent all the staff home, right? But actually, then as that was closed down, they sort of pivoted to a much more effective delivery function. So as the staff came back into the warehouse, you could accelerate the delivery. But they really showed point of care for their staff, first of all, because that was their primary experience, right? And it just, I think, made a difference because they've been one of the successful with that.
Yeah, and I think, Next have actually been a fascinating case study because they seem to have really come through with a brand new proposition, but maybe that's another story. But, over the course of this pandemic, in what other ways did the co-op as a retailer have to evolve?
So, gosh, we evolved in a lot of ways, but actually, when we look back on 2020, a lot of what was actually part of the co-op DNA was just accelerated and was just heightened. We have always been a purpose-driven, community-based and ethical business. But what we did was we accelerated that in response to the pandemic. So once we had really made sure that our colleagues and customers and members were safe and we were getting food on the shelves, we were able to deliver the best goodbyes for those unfortunate people that we lost during the pandemic. We then shifted to looking sort of wider in terms of what do the communities need. And we have a very strong community plan before COVID where we were supporting Mind charity. We support 4,500 local community causes. We have member pioneers. We have 1,000 member pioneers in communities across the country that work with our colleagues on the ground to support those communities. And what became very, very clear was that there was a crisis in those communities. The number one crisis was food poverty. And so very quickly, I pulled my normal Easter campaign that we'd been working tirelessly on for about 6 months. And we basically took that £2.5 million worth of advertising money and we phoned up Fair Share and we said, we want to do a campaign to support you. And as part of that process, we reached out and spoke with Marcus Rashford and he joined. And obviously, he has continued to do some of the most incredible things for particularly school children with the free school meals programme. We also, support our co-op academies. And again, before the government had sorted out the free school meals voucher support, we lent in and gave co-op vouchers to those children straight away because we knew we needed to act fast. And I think that speed of reaction was something that was, again, a big change for us. And again, it links into the topic, which is about business experience. How do we align around making those decisions quickly that ladder up to a purpose or an objective? And so we set up what we call internally a sort of 3 Horizons project where we're very, very clear what do we need to change now? How do we need to change things in the next 3 months? And then making sure we're really keeping an eye on what does that mean in terms of future strategies that needs to change, because there's a lot of things that are happening now that are going to be around in some shape or form into 21 and 22. So actually changing the agility of how we do that. And just to build on this a little bit more, it goes back to the colleagues piece. There were a lot of colleagues on the front line who were doing incredible stuff. I mean, we started with the raising money for Fair Share. We continue to distribute food waste into the local community. And at the moment, we're the only food retailer that distributes fresh products as well as ambient products. But actually, because we have this purpose, all the colleagues in the stores, off their own back and through their own initiatives, started doing things in their communities to help. And they posted them on social media. And as the person kind of, that oversees the brand, I look at these posts and there was nothing I saw that I didn't feel wasn't spot on to our brand. And what that gave me great joy was that our colleagues really understand what the Co-op is and what it stands for. And they felt empowered through a fantastic network of store leadership under Chris Whitfield's leadership, and the same under Sam Tyra for funerals, to go out and actually make those differences in their community. And that was really incredible and heartwarming. And so we knew we had something that we should build on.
Yeah, because it's interesting, because I suppose the point you make is the purpose. Has always been core to the Co-op, but suddenly it's core to most marketers now. It really has moved from the realms of being a sort of a side interest to a core principle. But Pratish, what others? Because the way businesses are operating in terms of the services they've had to offer over the last year, there's been lots of innovations, structural innovations as well. But can you give me some examples of the things you have seen and how businesses have had to change over the last few months?
Yeah, and I loved the examples there by Annie in terms of how her colleagues really represented and lived the purpose. And the purpose aspect is really so important. But there have been so many innovative things we've seen over the last, less than a year, how companies reacted. We worked very closely with a major North American retailer, Best Buy, where literally within the space of months, they pivoted to being a safer, more considerate operating environment, where not only did we help them restructure their digital proposition, but introduce sort of safe curbside pickup, pop-up stores, virtual consultations. If you just look at what Disney did in terms of Disney Plus, right? They had an ambition to go fully sort of content online. But what's extraordinary is that was a 5-year ambition. And yet they executed that transition within 5 months, right? They went to a fully digital content-based play. They have work to do, of course, but their subscription rate has gone through the roof. And I guess what I'm saying is all that stuff has been accelerated through having a clear purpose, through having a clear leadership that believes that experience is front and center, and actually to work with the agility that was just talked about there. It's really important to have that sponsorship, and that's why the business of experience is driven by savvy CEOs that sponsor it from the top down. I think that's really, for me, that's been a critical learning point. And then having the courage to join up the dots across the different elements of the organisation through colleagues like Ali explained, but all sorts of areas.
Yeah, and I suppose it's been a terrible year in many ways, but actually, if there's a silver lining, is this level of innovation. We have seen sort of remarkable innovation and also remarkable agility. But there has been these sort of disruptions in the past where there were similar levels of innovation, but then things went back to the way they were before. But do you think this pandemic's different? Do you think a lot of the things we've seen now are actually permanent? Do you want to go first, Pratish?
I think that there will be similarities on the impact of the global economy, through this pandemic, like we saw on major crisis such as 9/11. But I do think this pandemic really is very different, because 2021, I think we redefined the century, right? I think it starts now. Because I think if you look at it, it's changed the way we work, we play, we learn, shop, and we interact with one another. Who'd have thought we'd be doing a virtual call like this even 6 months ago, right? And a lot of these changes will hold. Some of them will go back to normal, but I think a lot of them will hold, because many have improved the things that we do, right? As businesses, we truly embrace digital stuff. But of course, we want to see some level of normal. But my hope, and I think Accenture Interactive is fun, if I'm honest, is that we work with our clients to map out new territories actually, to rebuild better and help brands do the same. I was reading about the Co-op and how it's now using its first electric vehicles for home delivery, right? And plans to replace its whole fleet by fossil-powered home delivery by 2025. And that's a fantastic example of rebuilding better and putting your money where your mouth is in terms of brand and purpose and really accelerating that shift together with the whole sort of digital agenda that they're pushing. So I think there's goodness to come from this as well as some normality, but I think it'll be a big shift.
Yeah, and there's no doubt that how you sum a lot of this up is experience, isn't it? Minali, what does within the co-op, obviously experience is important, but can you just sort of explain what you mean when you talk about experience within the context of the co-op?
Well, obviously, based on our different products and services, that different experiences, come across depending on the mission that the customer is wanting to buy, whether that's car insurance, a funeral plan, or popping to their local convenience store. I think experience has been slightly different, and I hope that we will see some changes, because there's been a lot of people who have been nervous about shopping, and so we as grocers have had to talk a lot about the experience that they'll have when they're in stores, that it'll be safe. We've asked them to go one way down an aisle. We've asked them to queue 2 meters apart. And I think what we are really thinking about is what is that experience post-COVID, when actually, your shopping mission is a quick pop in on the way to school, as opposed to, for me personally, it's my trip out, going to my local co-op, because that's all I can do. So, and a lot of people, like my mum, for example, based on her age, is nervous about shopping. So I think we will have to think about how we evolve those experiences. But fundamentally, it's really about understanding the customers and making sure, to Tash's point, the whole business understands the impact of what that customer experience is. But there's such great opportunity in learning, and I think we all, whether we're marketers or business people or CEOs, just have to be very, very open-minded and willing to learn, willing to be curious, and willing to listen.
Yeah, I suppose actually what actually might help just demonstrate exactly what experience is sort of explain exactly what it isn't. And so if you're not focusing on customer experience, what are the alternatives? Is it things like discounting, or how would you drive business if you're not investing in experience?
Gosh, well, I think the value proposition for us is all encompassing. The value in terms of price and promo is critical, but the other things that are becoming more and more important to us, and I hope will have the light shone back on them, is around sustainability. I think pre-COVID we were making some fantastic moves, from a media perspective and as well as what some businesses were doing, in terms of really thinking about the impact that we have on our planet. And obviously when the pandemic came, the focus was back to ourselves, back to our close families and communities. And I think one of the things I hope we do, and I know it's something that we as Co-op will lead on, is to make sure we address the balance, so that we're supporting the communities that need our help, but also, protecting our planet. And, we launched at the beginning of last year a very, very clear vision that, the Co-op cooperates for a fairer world. And we need to make sure that that's a fairer world at home for our communities, as much as it is a fairer world for our planet, and really making sure that we are thinking about the impact of plastics and packaging, thinking about the impacts of recycling, et cetera. And so I'm sure other people will follow, but we need to make sure we do it with speed and with conviction.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating stuff. And also what is also fascinating is your report, potential, which I mentioned in my introduction. But when you look through your report on business experience, it talks about unmet needs, which I can grasp, but it also spoke about unknown needs, which I find really interesting. Really, how can a business prepare for unknown needs?
Thank you. I think the simple answer is by turning yourself into a listening organisation. As Ali will know, there's a perennial debate within the CMO community about, is customer loyalty driven through human ingenuity or insight? Well, actually, it's both, right? The power comes from the cross-section, and that means, for me, picking up the signals through data, through research, for understanding what people are saying and how they're behaving, and really know the two are always the same. applying data across both marketing, sales, and rich insights across customer care and operations, financial services, and the business of experience is about using that data, applying things like artificial intelligence as well, to tap into how you constantly refine and make more efficient how you learn from customers, and that continual integration of qualitative and quantitative insight about a group of people can inform sort of actionable outcomes that you wouldn't see, just kind of assume you know what they don't know.
Yeah, and I suppose that actually aligns with what you just said, Ali, doesn't it, about being there for the community and being able to respond to the community's needs as they emerge?
We have to make sure we've learned from the fact that we had to make such quick changes last year. How do we keep that without killing our colleagues? Because we did work really hard and long hours when it first happened. I'm sure every business did. But how do we keep that agility in there so that when these unknown needs come through, you can quickly get access to the insight to validate and understand them more and be curious and ask the questions, and then quickly come up with the right test and learn or delivery plan to do it. I think the other thing that we as a business have learned significantly is making sure that we have got the right diverse set of colleagues and thinkers in the room. And, our diversity and inclusion and our anti-racist manifesto have absolutely accelerated through the pandemic, and obviously the impact that we had over the summer with the George Floyd, situation, which was absolutely horrendous. And I think we have all, as leaders and as colleagues with the Co-op, have been doing a lot of self-learning. And when it comes to an unknown future, having a broader and more diverse set of colleagues in the room and suppliers and supplier partners, that helps us to be much more equipped to deal with the unknown and the unmet challenges. So I think that's another important thing for us all to consider.
Yeah, but it is interesting because that sort of vision is obviously going to affect every single aspect of the organisation, which I suppose brings it back to your experience, business experience agenda. But really, given the fact that it does touch every single aspect of the organisation, what sort of roles do you think are critical in order to support a CEO who's trying to implement that sort of strategy?
It's a really good question. I think organisations are still learning the best sort of fit for them. But it really is an evolution of customer experience. It's around organising yourself around exceptional experience. CX was the remit of the marketing team, right? But business of experience is the entire company. And I think fundamentally, it's the support and sponsorship of the CEO that drives the organizational mindset shift, right? Recognizing that brands with purpose and vision play a critical role. 8 out of 10 consumers globally are saying that, purpose is at least as important as customer experience and driving loyalty. So I think for me, to answer your question, it's about organizing your functions so they all communicate across the different areas, whether that's customer service, finance, etc., HR, and they all have experience at their heart. And whether that's by introducing, experience architects or similar types of roles that work very closely with the marketing department to drive it. But I also think there's a significant role to play for the CMO, because I think the savvy CMOs know that they can own the transformation of experience and know that they can be at the pinnacle of kind of stitching together the evolution of their brands in the marketplace. Let's not forget, they get between 8 to 16% of revenue to spend and are increasingly being asked to be more accountable for that. And their ability to stitch brand experience and the business of experience across their organization to drive out that value, to drive out that loyalty, I think becomes a critical part of their role.
So Ali, do you agree that the role of the CMO really has to evolve in this new environment?
Yes, I do agree. But I think I go back to Pratash's earlier comment, which is it's the whole organisation. So I think we are a key support for the CEO and the rest of the board to talk about this. And I think what we are finding at the Co-op is that the silos, the departments and the verticals of structure are becoming less important, and it is the horizontals and the working of teams in squads that are actually more important. And I think, I've been fortunate that in all the roles I've had, as whether a customer director or marketing director, because marketing connects with so many different departments, we've always been quite collaborative, but it's particularly so at the Co-op. And one of the things that my CEO, Steve Morells, and my food CEO, Joe Whitfield, are incredibly passionate about is great ideas come from empowered colleagues who are SMEs or who are actually, face-to-face with customers. And so we're constantly looking at how you bring up the diverse range of talent to work with the SMEs in a horizontal fashion to bring ideas in a quick way. And then you learn very quickly and you move on. And I think that's where you start to deliver what Tash was talking about, which is customer being much more integrated across the whole business.
I think that's a really, really great point, because if you look at it, many organisations are still sort of organised around independent function. Separate leadership, different channel touch points, budgets, data, etc. And as a result, the experience often results in what the company needs instead of what the customer needs and what they can achieve. But the concept of squads or cross-functional teams that drive experience across all touch points, I think is really critical, and that is mindset. And then add to that the agility and the innovation that Ali talked about, and that's where you start to see the transformation that I think is required to deliver this.
Yeah. To help sort of people understand what this looks like in practice, have you examples of organisations you think are getting it right? Organisations that are worth maybe looking at if you're viewing this video.
Yeah, I think one of the ones that I really, really like is Nike, right? Nike's an excellent example of a company that embodies that in the winning way, right? So for Nike, experience is always rooted in massive cross-functional alignment to create differentiated physical and digital, right? Whether it's the launch of Deliveroo retail, houses of innovation, or a new concept store. Even look at the way that you can customize the shoe, right? I think it's called Nike by Me or something, where the customer is at the heart of involved in that experience. They're involved as much as anybody, or as I mentioned earlier, Best Buy, where we've really enabled them to embrace the business experience by not just growing employees' talent, but investing in technology and supporting the customer workforce to be able to do learning and development, as well as support, consumers in terms of pickup, virtual stores, etc. So I think that there are many, many examples starting to emerge, all accelerated through the pandemic.
Yeah, and Ali, apart from the Co-op, of course, have you any other examples?
This was a very difficult question, and I was chatting to my colleagues last night about it. I think the one I wanted to raise, and I hope they won't mind me saying this, I don't think they've absolutely nailed it, but I think our Deliveroo as a business is incredibly, interesting, and we're very privileged to be a key partner with them. And I think what I've seen from working with them for the past 18 months plus is how they've really adapted and thought about the situation and thought about how their proposition evolved. So obviously we all know they started off in delivering, takeaway food, when, we didn't want to go out ourselves to get it, or we didn't want to go to a restaurant. But the way that they've worked in partnership with us to do online delivered convenience grocery, and that's expanding out to other grocers, but also the way that they've partnered with us in some of the sort of the more business experience philosophies that we're talking about has been quite incredible. And we've really loved the fact that they've listened to some of our purpose, cooperating for a fairer world, and what we're trying to do. And so they are supporting a lot of community projects that we're involved in. So they're working with us and the Felix Project in London to help with redistribution of food. And I think that's because they are really thinking broadly about what they stand for as a business, and working collaboratively internally as well as with partners like ourselves. So I thought that was a really interesting example.
Oh, no, yeah, they're two really good examples. But I've got one more question. I think we've got time for one more question for you. Obviously 2020 was a year of lots of unexpected things, but looking forward to 2021, what would your key predictions be for this year? Who wants to go first? Patrice, you want to go first?
Cool. Great question, actually. And as you say, it's been an incredible year. But I think what I would say is every year we release something called Fueled Trends. And I always look at them intently, and it really crystallizes for me what I'm seeing here in the market. So the first one that comes to mind is Fueled use the term liquid infrastructure. But what does that really mean? Well, I think it means, it's dramatically changed in terms of how we're going to deliver joy through to the last moment at every touch point in the journey. The home has become the storefront, and many people want, sort of immediate gratification, delivery from store quickly, etc. So for me, that means companies really rethinking the position of the supply chain within the business, how they use those assets to really turn around the experience. JD.com in Asia, for example, has launched a proposition where it allows manufacturers to open new stores on its platform to tap into their marketing logistics to be able to deliver direct to consumers. So it's really rethinking about that. And openly also within that, shifting towards sustainable design and really bringing that at the heart of it and thinking about the hidden parts of their supply chain. For example, when you're waiting on the phone, how can you delight customers with that experience or waiting online? So I think that's the first one. The second one for me, I'll call do-it-yourself innovation. And it's about sort of the entrepreneurship that's emerged out of the pandemic, the way that people have set up their home offices, the way that entrepreneurship in the UK has really accelerated. Interestingly, in the UK, 50% more businesses, incredibly, were created in June 2020 compared to 2019. So people have really grasped that. And look at the way that the innovation is really accelerated through, NHS. We have the NHS deployed teams across all the infrastructure for their doctors, the ASOS marketplace where it connects independent retailers, Nike's personalized footwear conversation we had earlier about Nike by You or Adidas Master Lab, Maker Lab, sorry, it was called. So it's really driving that innovation. And I guess the third one for me is interaction and how we conduct more and more of our lives online, and therefore how we're going to make that as much as possible more enjoyable with virtual experiences by redesigning the approach, the content, the audience, and the interaction. Whether that's through reinventing virtual meetings, because it can be incredibly tiring spending all day on Zoom, or thinking about virtual events like the stuff Spotify have recently released around live streaming. And so I think there's a whole set of things around the interaction with kind of exercise and gyms and all that kind of stuff. So they'd be the three for me.
That's great. And I love the fact you managed to get the words joy and enjoy in that answer. So 2021 is going to be more enjoyable with more joy. That's what I take away from that. Ali, anything? What are your predictions for the year?
So some of them cross over with what's already been said. So I think for me, we've got to be prepared. That one of my predictions is that there will still be change, and the huge acceleration that Pritesh talked about in digital and online will continue. But what is the blended virtual and real world going to look like, both from us working? Because more people will work at home virtually, but then people will be back in the office. And what does that look like? And there'll be new etiquettes, new ways of working that we'll have to adapt to, which is change. But then the consumer journeys are going to be much more hybrid as they keep the benefits of the digital journey and the digital shopping experience, but they want to still have that human connection. So I think that's one for me. I think the second one is that the purpose-driven businesses that actually really know what their values are will continue to flourish, because I think consumers have really seen those who have said they have a purpose, but also shown that they have a purpose, and those that just said it. And so that's going to become even more important. So really making sure that you've got actions and not just words is going to be absolutely critical. And then I think there's going to be a very big celebration at some point. And I think we need to embrace it. I hope the media embraces it with some positivity and some celebration, and actually helps to lift the mood of the nation, because they have a role to play. We as businesses and marketeers have a role to play. And I'm just hoping that God or the weather or the powers that be grant us a warm summer. We can get festivals, the sporting events back together, so that people can come together and just, celebrate that we've got through this, but also be thankful that we've got through this as well.
That's great. Well, there you have it. It's going to be a year of joy and celebration. So on that note, we should maybe end it while we're ahead. So Pratish and Ali, thank you very much for these insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks once again to my guests, Pratish Gadia and Ali Jones. And if you want to find out more about business experience, you can download the full Accenture Interactive Report by following the link in the article associated with this video. I predict you'll find it really useful. Goodbye.